Sweetheart, I've got news. Mom is getting married for the third time, and as a wedding gift for the newlyweds, I took out a mortgage on a cottage. So for the next 45 years, you'll need to work at least 2 jobs, the satisfied husband announced. I just smiled and calmly said something that left my husband speechless. And before we begin, I ask you to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you, and enjoy listening. Olivia was standing by the kitchen window, watching the last October leaves swirl outside the glass. The apartment was quiet, only a TV murmuring somewhere behind the neighbor's wall. An ordinary Thursday evening. Ordinary if not for one thing: in just a few minutes, her life was about to be turned upside down. She didn't know it yet. She didn't know that the husband who was about to open the front door would bring with him news that would make any woman's knees buckle. News so absurd, so monstrously naive in its cruelty, that it would be hard to believe. But Olivia would handle it. She always did. To understand what happens next and why Olivia reacts the way she does, we need to go back 3 years. To that rainy September day when she first saw Victor. It was late September, a Saturday, one of those days when summer had fully given up its ground and fall was just beginning to take over. The sky had been gloomy since morning, promising rain, but Olivia decided to take a walk downtown anyway. The work week had been exhausting, and she just wanted to be alone, without endless calls, emails, and reports. Olivia was 32 years old. She worked at a large international company as a key account manager, a demanding, nerve-wracking position, but well paid. She owned a 2-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood, bought 5 years earlier with her savings and a small mortgage, which she had paid off early in just 3 years. Olivia knew how to handle money and plan for the future. Her parents had taught her that. Her father, Paul, taught history at a university, and her mother, Helen, worked as a general practitioner at a city clinic. An educated family with modest means, but solid values. Never live in debt, her father used to say. And never rely on anyone but yourself. Olivia remembered those words for life. Her parents lived in another city, about 4 hours away by train. They didn't see each other as often as they would have liked, but they talked on the phone every Sunday. Her mom always asked, "So, sweetheart, haven't you met anyone yet?" And every time Olivia answered, "Mom, don't rush me. When there's someone, I'll tell you." After a failed relationship 5 years earlier, she didn't exactly avoid men, she just wasn't in a hurry anymore. Back then, at 27, she had almost married Andrew, her coworker. Everything was fine until she accidentally found out that he was also seeing her friend at the same time. It was a painful lesson, after which Olivia learned to look at people more carefully. That September day, she stopped by a bookstore on the corner of Lexington Avenue, a large, 2-story place with wooden shelves and the smell of fresh printing ink. Outside, the sky finally broke into rain, and Olivia decided to wait out the weather by browsing new releases. She loved reading. As a child, she could devour a thick novel over a weekend. These days she had less time for books, but the habit never went away. Olivia absent-mindedly ran her finger along the spines, pulled books out, read the blurbs, and put them back. "Excuse me," a voice sounded behind her. "Could you help me?" Olivia turned around. A man about her age stood in front of her, maybe a little older. A pleasant, open face, gray-blue eyes, dark blonde hair slightly damp from the rain. Apparently he had also run in to escape the weather. He was holding 2 books and looked completely lost. "I'm looking for a gift for my mom," he explained, noticing Olivia's questioning look. "I can't decide between these 2. Maybe you could advise me?" Olivia took the books. One was a typical cozy mystery with a bright cover. She'd read those, nothing special. The other was a family saga by a well-known author, a solid hardcover volume. "What does your mom usually read?" Olivia asked, studying the man. There was something likable about him. Maybe it was the slightly embarrassed smile, or the way he shifted nervously from foot to foot. "Honestly, I don't know," he admitted sheepishly. "I usually give her chocolates or cosmetics. But this time I wanted to be original. It's her anniversary, she's turning 60. Olivia smiled despite herself. There was something touching about this grown man, helplessly standing there with books for his mom. "Take this one," she said, handing him the family saga. "I think a woman her age would enjoy a story about several generations." There's love, destiny, time. Plus, the author is well known and writes really well. Thank you so much, the man exhaled with visible relief. You saved me. I'm Victor, by the way. Olivia, she replied, shaking his outstretched hand. The handshake was firm but not rough. Listen, Olivia, Victor hesitated, maybe I could thank you with a cup of coffee? There's a nice cafe right across the street. I've been there a couple of times, it's a really decent place. Olivia hesitated for a second. She usually didn't agree to spontaneous invitations from strangers. But something about this man put her at ease, maybe his awkward sincerity, or the way he carefully chose a gift for his mom. In the end, what was so bad about a cup of coffee? Why not? She smiled. Let's just wait until the rain stops. The rain, however, had no intention of stopping. They stood by the display window for about 10 minutes, chatting about the weather and books, and then Victor pulled a small folding umbrella out of his bag and said, "Let's take a chance. It's about 50 meters to the cafe, we can make a run for it." They dashed across the street under one umbrella, laughing and dodging puddles. When they burst into the cafe, both were a little wet but cheerful. Inside it was warm and cozy, smelling of fresh pastries and cinnamon. They took a table by the window, overlooking the wet street with a few passing pedestrians. "So, Olivia," Victor began when the waitress brought them coffee and a blueberry pie to share, "what do you do, if it's not a secret?" "I work at an international company, as a client manager," she replied, warming her hands on the cup. "Nothing special. Negotiations, contracts, endless calls." "And you?" "I'm an engineer at a design firm." "Nothing heroic either. Drawings, calculations, approvals. But I like it. I love when real buildings grow out of lines on paper." The conversation flowed easily, as if they had known each other for a long time. Victor turned out to be an interesting conversationalist. He talked a lot about his projects, his coworkers, and fishing, a hobby he'd loved since childhood. His father had taught him how to fish when he was a boy, and it had stayed with him ever since. "Though I barely remember my dad," Victor grew somber. "He left when I was 6. Mom raised me on her own." "I'm really sorry," Olivia said sincerely. "It's okay," Victor shrugged, but it was clear the topic was painful. "My mom is an amazing woman. She worked 2 jobs her whole life so I wouldn't lack anything. We're very close." Olivia noted the warmth with which he spoke about his mother. It was nice, a man who valued family. She also shared a bit about herself, her parents, her childhood in a small town, how she moved here after college and started building her career. She didn't mention her failed relationship with Andrew. It wasn't the level of closeness for such confessions. Time flew by unnoticed. When they finally checked the time, they realized they had been sitting in the cafe for almost 3 hours. Outside it was already dark, the rain had stopped, and streetlights reflected on the wet asphalt. "Oh, I need to run," Olivia said suddenly. "I still have things to do today." "Of course," Victor nodded. "Thank you for the company and for helping with the book. Without you, I'd probably still be standing there trying to choose." He paid for both of them despite Olivia's protests and walked her to the exit. Outside, the air was cool and smelled of wet leaves. "Olivia," Victor began a little uncertainly, "I really enjoyed talking with you. Maybe we could exchange numbers? I'd like to invite you out again sometime, if you don't mind, of course." Olivia thought for a second. Victor seemed like a pleasant person. Being with him felt easy and comfortable. Why not give it a try? "Sure," she smiled, pulling out her phone. They exchanged numbers, said goodbye, and went their separate ways. Olivia didn't expect Victor to call her that same evening, just to make sure she got home safely and to thank her again for a lovely time. How thoughtful, she thought, setting the phone down after the call. Her heart felt warm and a little excited. She hadn't felt that way in a long time. Their first real date happened 3 days later. Victor invited her to a small Italian restaurant near her place. He had specifically found out her address so it would be convenient for her. He picked her up in a taxi and handed her a bouquet of white chrysanthemums when they met. "I hope you like these flowers," he said a little shyly. "For some reason they reminded me of you. Just as elegant. Very beautiful." "Thank you," Olivia was touched. Over 2 years together, Andrew had given her flowers maybe 3 times at most, and only on holidays. The restaurant was cozy and not crowded. Soft music, dim lighting, the smell of garlic and herbs from the kitchen. They chose a table in the corner, away from other guests. Victor was visibly nervous, and Olivia found it endearing. He kept adjusting the napkin, moving the cutlery, clearly not knowing what to do with his hands. But once he started talking, he relaxed. They again found common ground easily, as if picking up a conversation that had been paused 3 days earlier. That evening, Victor talked a lot about his mom. About how she worked as an accountant during the day and took on side jobs at home in the evenings to pay for his swimming lessons and private tutors. About how she denied herself everything just so her son wouldn't lack a thing. About how she still cooks meatloaf and mac and cheese for him every Sunday, because restaurant food isn't real food. She's an amazing woman, Victor said warmly. I owe her everything. We're very close. We talk every day, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. Olivia listened and nodded. She liked that Victor valued his mother so much. It spoke of him as a grateful, family-oriented person. Still, something deep inside pricked at her. We talk every day, 2 or 3 times sounded a little excessive? But she brushed the thought aside. After all, it was his mom, his only close family. What was so strange about that? After dinner, Victor walked her to her building. They lingered a bit by the door, unsure how to say goodbye. The moment was awkward and exciting at the same time. Olivia, Victor said softly, may I kiss you? Instead of answering, she leaned in herself. Their first kiss was gentle and slightly uncertain, as if both were afraid to scare off something fragile that was beginning between them. I'll call you tomorrow, Victor whispered as he pulled away. And he really did call. 2 days later, they met again. Then again and again. Movies, a classical music concert, a modern art exhibition, walks through an autumn park, dinner at Olivia's place, where she cooked her signature pot roast for him for the first time, using her mom's recipe. Their relationship developed quickly. After just a month, Victor sometimes stayed over for the night. After 2 months, they began discussing the idea of moving in together. Your place is bigger and more comfortable, Victor reasoned. And it's yours, while I rent mine. It would make sense for me to move in with you. I'll pay half the utilities, buy groceries. What do you think? Olivia agreed, though she felt a slight sense of unease. Weren't they moving too fast? Just 3 months of knowing each other, and already living together. But Victor eased her doubts with his care and attentiveness. He helped around the house, always asked how she was feeling, brought her breakfast in bed on weekends, and gave small but touching gifts for no reason: a chocolate bar, a funny card, a book she wanted to read. The first months of living together were almost perfect. Almost because even then, the first warning signs began to appear. Olivia noticed them but tried not to give them much importance. She told herself they were minor things, that she was being picky, that every relationship has its quirks. The first alarm bell rang about 3 months into their life together. Victor started going to his mom's place more often. Sometimes several times a week, sometimes staying overnight. She's lonely, he explained. And she hasn't been feeling well, she needs help. Olivia understood and didn't object. Caring for parents is important and right. What bothered her was something else. Victor consulted his mom about literally everything. From choosing a gift for a coworker to deciding which shirt to wear to a corporate event. Once, when they were discussing where to go on vacation, Victor suddenly said, Mom thinks it's better to go to Mexico. All-inclusive, no worries, and not expensive. Olivia was taken aback. Did you talk to your mom about this? She asked, trying to stay calm. We haven't even decided yet where we want to go. Well, yeah, I called her and asked for advice, Victor shrugged. She has a lot of travel experience, she's been all over. Victor, this is our vacation. Maybe we should first decide what we want, and only then ask someone else. Olivia, why are you starting this? Irritation crept into Victor's voice. Mom just wanted to help. She meant well. Olivia fell silent, but the aftertaste remained. In the end, they went to Italy, just as she wanted. But before that, Victor spent a long time apologizing to his mom on the phone, looking so guilty, as if he had done something terrible. This is strange, Olivia thought, listening to his conversation. But she said nothing out loud. The second warning sign was Victor's attitude toward money. Olivia was financially literate. She kept a budget, set aside part of her salary into savings, planned major purchases in advance. Her parents had taught her that money requires order and accountability. Victor, on the other hand, lived paycheck to paycheck. Got paid, spent it. No money, oh well, we'll get by until the next one. He often made impulsive purchases, a new fishing rod even though the old one was in great condition, expensive headphones, some gadget that later gathered dust on a shelf. Victor, maybe we should track our expenses, Olivia suggested once. Just to understand how much we're spending and on what. Why complicate things? He waved it off. We're not struggling. There's enough money, that's what matters. If anything, you can always borrow until payday. Borrow from whom? Well, from Mom, for example. She'll always help out. Olivia stayed quiet but made a mental note. A grown man, 34 years old, still taking money from his mom. That was unsettling. But the truly serious conflict happened after 6 months of living together. They decided to save up for a vacation, a good one, 2 weeks in Spain. Olivia had been setting aside her share for several months, and Victor promised to add his part at the end of the month when he got his bonus. He did get the bonus, a good one, almost half his salary. But he spent the money on an expensive Swiss knife for his friend Thomas, whose birthday it was, and on gold earrings for his mom. She had wanted them for a long time. How could you? Olivia didn't raise her voice, but it trembled with restrained anger. We had an agreement. I've been saving for 3 months. Well, it's Thomas's milestone, 35, Victor. I couldn't give him something cheap. And Mom? She was so happy about the earrings, you should have seen her. Don't worry, we still have 3 months before the trip, I'll save up. Victor, this isn't the first time, Olivia said tiredly. You keep promising and not following through. Do our plans even matter to you? Or is it just Thomas and your mom? Don't say that, he snapped. I didn't do it on purpose. It just happened. What, should I refuse the people closest to me now? They had a serious fight. The first one in their entire relationship. Olivia asked Victor to move out for a few days. She needed time to think. They didn't see each other for 2 weeks. Victor called every day, apologized, promised to change. Olivia missed him but stayed firm. She needed to understand, was this an accident or a pattern? Was this person capable of changing? On the 15th day of their separation, Victor came to her place with a huge bouquet of roses, a bottle of champagne, and an envelope. What's this? Olivia asked, taking the envelope. Open it. Inside was money. Exactly the amount she had spent on their shared plans beyond her share. I took on an extra project and worked weekends, Victor explained. Dark circles sat under his eyes. He was clearly exhausted. Olivia, I get it now. I really do. I'm sorry. I won't do this again. They made up. Victor moved back in. And for a while, he really did become more responsible with money. He started writing down expenses in a notebook, consulted Olivia before purchases over $200, even opened a savings account and put aside a small amount every month. Olivia breathed a sigh of relief. People can change. You just have to give them a chance. But the issue with his mom didn't go anywhere. And that was much more serious. Victor's mom's name was Margaret. When Olivia finally met her at a family dinner for some minor occasion, she immediately felt the tension. Margaret was a controlling woman, the kind used to having everything under her command. Short, heavyset, with chestnut-dyed hair and a sharp brown-eyed gaze. She greeted Olivia with exaggerated friendliness, kissed her on both cheeks, and seated her at a table set as if for a holiday. Victor has told me so much about you, she chirped, placing salads on plates. Finally, we meet. It's about time, about time. But the look with which Margaret examined Olivia from head to toe spoke louder than any words. There was everything in that look: assessment, comparison, and Olivia could have sworn, a hint of disappointment. Apparently, her son had described her differently. Or Margaret simply wasn't ready to accept the fact that another woman had appeared beside her Victor. All evening, her future mother-in-law asked questions that seemed harmless on the surface but were, in essence, veiled criticism. "Olivia, you're in a managerial position, right?" she asked, pouring tea. "You must spend a lot of time at work. And what about home comfort? Cooking?" "My Victor loves homemade food." "I cook," Olivia replied calmly. "Victor likes it." "Well, that's just him being polite," Margaret laughed. "Men are like that, they don't want to offend." "And what an interesting blouse you have. Is that what's fashionable now?" "I don't really follow trends," Olivia answered. "I prefer classics." Olivia was wearing an elegant silk blouse in a muted burgundy shade, expensive, stylish, bought at a good store. But after Margaret's words, she suddenly felt inappropriately dressed. Victor seemed to notice nothing. He enthusiastically devoured his mom's meatballs, talked about work, about his and Olivia's plans for the summer. Margaret listened, nodded, but from time to time threw Olivia looks that made her uneasy. After that dinner, Olivia tried to talk to Victor. "Victor, did it seem to me, or was your mom not very happy to see me?" "What? Are you kidding?" he said, genuinely surprised. "Mom is thrilled. She called me afterward and said you're very sweet." Sweet was clearly not the word that described Margaret's attitude. But Olivia decided not to argue. Maybe she really was overthinking it. Maybe it was just the first meeting awkwardness, getting used to each other. But things only got worse after that. Margaret began calling her son regularly with requests. Sometimes she needed help with repairs. "Victor, my faucet is leaking. Plumbers are so expensive. You can fix it yourself." Sometimes she needed him to go with her to the clinic. "I'm scared to go alone. What if it's something serious?" Sometimes to bring groceries. "The bags at the store are so heavy, I can't carry them." Victor never refused. He dropped everything at any time of day or night, abandoned plans with Olivia, and rushed off to his mom. Once, they were getting ready to go out of town for the weekend. Olivia had booked a cozy cabin by a lake in advance. They had both taken Friday off work to leave early. And just as the suitcases were packed and Victor was carrying them out to the car, his phone rang. "Yes, Mom." "What happened?" "The faucet? Again?" "Okay, I'm coming now." He came back into the apartment looking guilty. "Olivia, Mom's faucet is leaking again. I need to go fix it. It'll be quick, 2 hours tops, there and back." "Victor, we were about to leave. We'll lose the reservation. What am I supposed to do? I can't just abandon my mom. She'll flood the neighbors. Can't she call a plumber? Why waste money if I can do it myself?" Victor snapped. "Olivia, she's my mother. Are you really upset that I'm helping her?" They argued. Victor left for his mom's place offended. He came back late that evening. It turned out that after fixing the faucet, his mom convinced him to stay for dinner. Then they watched some movie, and he didn't even notice how time flew by. The trip out of town, of course, fell through. Olivia lay in the dark and thought, what is going on? Why can't a grown man say no to his mother? Why are her wishes always the top priority, and his and Olivia's plans always last? She decided not to escalate the conflict. Maybe it was a one-time thing. Maybe his mom really needed help. But the incidents kept piling up. Sunday lunch at his mom's instead of a planned theater visit. An urgent outlet repair on Saturday morning when they were supposed to go to the market for groceries. Long evening phone calls during which Victor would go into another room and come back an hour, sometimes an hour and a half later. Mom thinks, Mom says, Mom advises. These phrases came up so often that Olivia started counting. On some days, Victor mentioned his mom 15 to 20 times. But the most unpleasant thing happened when Margaret came over to their place for the first time. She inspected the apartment like an auditor conducting a check. She looked into the closets, opened kitchen cabinets, even poked her nose into the fridge. And all of it with commentary. "Victor, you have so little space in the closet. How do you even fit in here? You have so many clothes. And why are the dishes on this shelf? It's so inconvenient to reach. And the fridge is so small. How do you two manage?" Olivia clenched her teeth in silence. It was her apartment. Her shelves, her closets, her fridge. And some outsider was telling her how everything should be arranged. The peak of the visit came when Margaret noticed a family photo of Olivia with her parents on a shelf. A simple photo in a plain wooden frame, the three of them by the sea, from a vacation 3 years ago. What an interesting frame, her mother-in-law drawled. I would choose something more elegant. And honestly, this photo doesn't really belong here. Maybe you should put it somewhere else? And she personally moved the photo to the far edge of the shelf, almost behind a flower pot. Olivia felt rage boiling in her chest. No, she didn't make a scene in front of her mother-in-law. She smiled, offered tea, waited until Margaret finally left. And then she told Victor everything she thought. Victor, your mom rearranged my things in my own home. She commented on every corner, every shelf. She told me how my apartment should be set up. Olivia, you're exaggerating, Victor frowned. Mom just wanted to help. She's run a household her whole life, she knows what's best. She has experience. This is my home, Victor. Mine. I'll decide where my photos go. Don't yell at me, Victor raised his voice. And don't talk about my mother like that. She only wants what's best for us. You just don't know her. I know enough, Olivia replied coldly. That argument was more serious than the previous ones. For 2 days, they barely spoke, exchanging only basic household phrases. Then Victor apologized not for his mom, but for raising his voice. Olivia accepted the apology, but the aftertaste remained. She realized something important: the problem with Margaret wasn't going anywhere. If she wanted to be with Victor, she would have to somehow adapt to this situation. Accept the constant presence of her mother-in-law in their lives. And she decided to try. Because despite all his flaws, Victor was a good person. Caring, attentive when his mom wasn't around. When Olivia got sick, he took care of her, made tea with honey and raspberries, ran to the pharmacy for medicine in the middle of the night. When she went through a rough patch at work, a conflict with her boss, the threat of being fired, he supported her, encouraged her, believed in her. He remembered all the important dates, celebrated little anniversaries, left notes with warm words. Olivia loved him. Or thought she did. Sometimes the line between those things is very thin. After a 1.5 years of dating, Victor proposed. It was a regular Friday evening. They had agreed to have dinner at a restaurant, the same Italian place where they had their first date. Olivia thought it was just a romantic gesture, a pleasant memory. But when they sat down at the table, Victor was acting strangely. He was nervous, constantly checking his watch, dabbing his forehead with a napkin. Victor, are you okay? Olivia asked. Yes, everything's great, he answered quickly. Just wait a minute. He waved over the waiter and whispered something to him. A minute later, music started playing, the very melody Olivia had once mentioned she loved. From behind a screen, a bouquet of white roses was brought out, huge, probably 101 of them. Victor stood up, walked around the table, and dropped to one knee. Olivia, his voice was trembling, you've become the center of my universe. I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me? A velvet box appeared in his hands. Inside was a ring, exactly the one she had dreamed of, simple, elegant, with a small diamond. Victor later admitted he had asked her friend Rachel about Olivia's taste. She looked at him kneeling, with hope and fear in his eyes, and thought, am I ready? With all these problems, with his mother always looming behind him, with his financial carelessness. But then she remembered all the good things. His care, his warmth, his childlike joy over simple things. She remembered how he read to her out loud when she was sick. How he taught her to fish, even though she never caught anything. How he laughed at her jokes, even the not-so-funny ones. Yes, she breathed out. Yes, I'll marry you. The restaurant guests applauded. The waiter brought champagne on the house. The evening turned into a small celebration. Later, when the euphoria faded, Olivia asked herself, did she do the right thing? But it was already too late for doubts. She had said yes, and there was no turning back. Wedding preparations became a real ordeal. The very next day after the proposal, Victor called his mom. Olivia heard Margaret squealing with delight on the other end of the line. And then, demanding and cheerful, come over today. We'll celebrate. I'll bake a pie. At dinner at her future mother-in-law's place, Olivia fully realized for the first time what she was getting into. They hadn't even sat down at the table when Margaret started planning their wedding. Not Victor and Olivia's wedding, hers. That's how it looked. I think June is best, she said, putting potato salad on their plates. Early in the month. Not too hot and still fresh. I know a wonderful place for the reception, the Riverside Inn restaurant. My friend Karen is the manager there. She'll give us a good discount. Mom, we haven't discussed dates yet, Victor tried to intervene. What's there to discuss? June is the perfect time for a wedding. Everyone does it. And the dress needs to be ordered in advance, Margaret turned to Olivia. I have a seamstress I know, she makes amazing gowns. Inexpensive and high quality. I already talked to her, she agreed. Olivia silently ate her potato salad, feeling irritation boil inside her. She had dreamed of a small, cozy wedding, 30 to 40 people, only the closest ones. An outdoor ceremony in a park, a reception instead of a banquet, live music. But in Margaret's vision, it was supposed to be a lavish celebration with 100 guests, half of them her friends and acquaintances. In the car on the way home, Olivia voiced her concerns. Victor, it feels like your mom is planning her own wedding, not ours. She's just happy for us and wants to help, Victor replied. She has a lot of experience organizing celebrations. The anniversaries she threw were huge. But this is our wedding, Victor. We should decide what it's going to be like. Of course, he agreed easily. We'll talk everything through. Don't worry. But when it came to the actual planning, Margaret ended up at the center of the entire process. She went with them to look at restaurants and categorically rejected every option Olivia liked. She ordered the cake her choice, without asking the bride's opinion. She picked invitations with doves and rings, even though Olivia wanted something minimalist. She insisted on a traditional ceremony at City Hall, while Olivia dreamed of an outdoor ceremony in a park. That's not serious, her mother-in-law declared. Normal people get married at City Hall, the proper way. She even tried to influence the choice of the wedding dress. She brought a catalog from her seamstress, puffy gowns with crinolines, lace, and bows, like layered cakes. This one is very beautiful, she jabbed her finger at the photos. A real wedding dress, not like those modern rags. Here Olivia stood her ground. The dress was her territory, and no one was going to tell her how to look on her own wedding day. She bought what she liked, elegant, straight cut, with an open back and minimal embellishments. Margaret pursed her lips but said nothing. The 3 months of wedding preparation became a living hell. She and Victor argued constantly over his mother's interference, over the guest list, over the budget. Every time, Victor sided with his mom. She just wants what's best, he repeated like a mantra. You just don't understand her. Several times Olivia was on the verge of calling everything off. Returning the ring. Saying, I've changed my mind. But each time something stopped her. Love? Fear of starting over? Hope that things would get better after the wedding? She didn't know. And she still doesn't. The wedding took place in June, just as Margaret wanted. At the Riverside Inn restaurant, as she had insisted. 100 guests, half of whom Olivia was seeing for the first time in her life. But the dress was hers. The hairstyle was her choice. And their first dance was to a song she picked, not her mother-in-law. Small victories. Olivia learned to value small victories. At the reception, Margaret reigned supreme. She accepted congratulations as if it were her wedding. Told everyone how she had helped the newlyweds with the planning. Gave Olivia advice in front of the guests, take good care of my Victor. A man needs to be fed well, then he won't look at other women. Have kids while you're young. Olivia smiled and nodded. It was her day, and she wasn't going to ruin it. After the wedding, they flew off on their honeymoon to Spain, just as Olivia had planned from the very beginning. 2 weeks without Margaret felt like a breath of fresh air. Victor beside her, without his mother's influence, once again became the man she had fallen in love with, attentive, cheerful, caring. Maybe it really will get better, Olivia thought, watching the sunset over Barcelona. Maybe after the wedding everything will fall into place. It didn't. The first year of marriage went along the same worn track. Margaret called, visited, gave advice, interfered in their lives. Victor went to see her, helped her, consulted her on every issue. Olivia learned to live with it. She developed a strategy not to argue head-on, to choose her battles, to defend only what truly mattered. To endure the rest. She wasn't a doormat. No. She was a smart woman who understood that there are things you can't change. You can only accept them or leave. She wasn't ready to leave yet. Besides, she had her own life work, friends, hobbies. She wasn't going to put all of that on hold because of her mother-in-law. She kept building her career, got promoted, became a department head. She saved money now separately from Victor, into her own personal account. It was her small safety net. Just in case, she told herself. You never know. Victor didn't know about that account. Olivia didn't think it was necessary to tell him. After the story with the bonus that was spent on gifts for his mom and Thomas, she stopped trusting her husband when it came to money. The second year of marriage was like the first. And the third, too. Margaret got married for the second time. Her chosen one was George, a widower in his early 60s whom she had met at a resort in Palm Springs. The wedding was modest, with a small circle of guests. But the gift from her son, a pricey kitchen set, was lavish. Victor went into debt to buy it. Olivia found out after the fact. You could have at least talked to me, she said tiredly. That's a lot of money. Mom was so happy, Victor spread his hands. And besides, it's a gift for her. Not some stranger. Olivia stayed silent. She had long stopped arguing about this. It was pointless. The marriage with George lasted a year and a half. Then they divorced. Her mother-in-law discovered that her husband was messaging a former classmate and threw a massive scandal. Victor went to comfort his mom every day for 2 weeks straight. After the divorce, Margaret seemed to grow younger. She lost weight, dyed her hair blonde, started dressing more brightly. And she began actively looking for a new husband. I need a man's hand in the house, she told her son. It's hard alone. And besides, I'm not old yet. 64 is not an age. Olivia watched this with a mix of amazement and irritation. Her mother-in-law behaved like a young woman on the marriage market. She signed up for dating sites, went to dance evenings for people over 50, tried on outfits while consulting her son. Victor, how do you like this dress? Is the neckline too low? What is this circus? Olivia thought. But she kept quiet. What did she care about her mother-in-law's personal life, as long as it didn't affect her directly? But then it did. That October Thursday started like any other. Olivia got up at 7, had coffee, got ready for work. Victor was still asleep. He had the day off, time off for overtime. She kissed the top of his head, left a note on the kitchen table, and left. The workday was ordinary meetings, calls, reports. Nothing out of the ordinary. Around 6 in the evening, Olivia headed home. On the way, she stopped by the supermarket and bought groceries for dinner. She was thinking of making seafood pasta. Victor loved it. When she opened the apartment door, Victor was already in the kitchen. Strange, on his days off he usually lounged on the couch until she got home, watching football or playing video games. But that wasn't the strange part. What was strange was the expression on his face. He was literally glowing. Smiling. From the moment she stepped inside. Finally. I have amazing news. Olivia put the bags on the table and took off her coat. Something inside her shifted uneasily. A premonition? Intuition? What happened? She asked, trying to sound calm. Sit down. Victor was practically bouncing with excitement. No, better stand. No, sit. Doesn't matter. Victor, you're scaring me. What happened? He took a deep breath, like before jumping into water, and blurted it out. But to understand exactly what he said and what Olivia's reaction was, you need to know one more important thing. Something Victor didn't know. Something Olivia had been hiding from him all these 3 years. Back in the first year of their life together, after the story with the bonus, Olivia made an important decision. She would never again be financially dependent on a man. Never put herself in a position where her fate was in someone else's hands. She opened a separate bank account that Victor didn't know about. Every month she set aside part of her salary, at first a little, then more. After her promotion, the amounts grew significantly. Over 3 years, a solid sum accumulated in that account. Enough to live comfortably for a year or a year and a half, even if she lost both her job and her husband tomorrow. But that wasn't all. A year ago, Olivia's grandmother, her mom's mother, who lived in a small town in Pennsylvania, passed away. Olivia went to the funeral, helped with the arrangements, supported her mom. Her grandmother had been a kind, good woman, and her passing was a blow to the whole family. After the funeral, it turned out that her grandmother had left an inheritance. An old house in town. It went to Olivia's mom. And an unexpected savings account in the granddaughter's name. Her grandmother had saved little by little her whole life from her pension, from selling vegetables from her garden, from what her children gave her. It added up to a considerable amount. "This is for you, Olivia," her grandmother wrote in a note attached to the documents. "For a rainy day. Or a good one. You decide." Olivia didn't tell Victor about it. Not because she didn't trust him, although, hand on heart, complete trust was already gone. It was just. Those were her money. Her safety net. Her freedom. She transferred her grandmother's inheritance to her own account. Now she had enough to start a new life if she needed to. Buy a small apartment. Or leave somewhere. Or start her own business. She wasn't planning to leave Victor. No. She just wanted to know that she could do it at any moment. That she had a choice. Choice is freedom. And Olivia valued freedom above all else. There was one more secret. One that no one knew about except Olivia herself and her best friend, Rachel. 3 months ago, during a corporate conference in Boston, Olivia met someone. His name was James. He was a partner at a large consulting firm. Smart, interesting, with a great sense of humor. They talked the entire evening at the welcome cocktail, then coincidentally ended up at neighboring tables at the gala dinner. Nothing happened. Olivia was a married woman and had no intention of cheating on her husband, no matter how complicated their marriage was. But something did happen in her mind. She suddenly realized that men could be different. That there were partnerships where two people make decisions together. Where no one runs to their mom for advice, doesn't spend family money on gifts for relatives, doesn't put his wife second. James gave her his business card. "If you ever want to discuss career opportunities," he said, "we need specialists like you." Olivia took the card and put it in her wallet. Not to call someday. Just as a reminder. A reminder that life doesn't end with Victor and his mom. That there could still be opportunities ahead. She still didn't know if she would ever use those opportunities. But she knew they existed. And now she was standing in the kitchen, looking at her excited husband, waiting for his amazing news. Possibilities flashed through her mind. A promotion? A bonus? Some kind of surprise? Victor took a deep breath, broke into a wide smile, and said, "Sweetheart, I have news. Mom is getting married for the 3rd time. Can you imagine? She found herself a man. His name is Robert, some kind of businessman. And as a wedding gift for the newlyweds, I took out a mortgage on a cottage. So for the next 45 years you'll need to work at least 2 jobs. He laughed, pleased, happy, like a man who had just accomplished the greatest feat of his life. Olivia was silent. She looked at her husband and couldn't believe he had said that. That he had actually done this. "Victor," her voice was strangely calm, "please repeat that. I'm not sure I understood correctly." "The cottage," he repeated joyfully. "A country house. Mom has dreamed of it for so long. 2 stories, half an acre of land, a sauna, a 2-car garage. Beautiful. She and Robert will live there, fresh air, nature. It'll be good for Mom, you know she has blood pressure issues. And you took out a mortgage?" "Well, yeah. The down payment was my savings, the ones I was setting aside for fishing gear. And the loan is for 25 years. The monthly payment is pretty hefty, of course, but we'll manage. You're smart, you'll find a side job. Maybe tutoring or some freelance work. And I'll try too. I'll take on extra projects." Olivia slowly sank onto a stool. Her head felt empty and ringing, like a church after a service. How much? She asked. How much what? How much does this cottage cost? He named the amount. Olivia closed her eyes. These weren't just big money. They were enormous. Astronomical. You could buy 2 decent apartments in their city for that amount. And you signed the papers. It wasn't a question. A statement. Well, yeah. This morning, while you were at work, Mom said there were other buyers and we had to hurry. So I went to the bank. By the way, the lines were crazy. I barely made it before closing. Without me. Olivia, you were at work. I couldn't distract you. Besides, it was a surprise. He smiled again, but the smile was no longer so confident. It was starting to dawn on him that something was wrong. Olivia opened her eyes and looked at her husband. Just looked long, carefully, as if seeing him for the first time. In front of her stood a grown man. 37 years old. College educated. A good job. And at the same time an absolute, clinical infant who had just saddled them with a debt the size of a small fortune to gift his mom a house. A mom who was marrying some businessman. A mom who, if Robert really was a businessman, could easily buy herself 10 cottages. Victor, Olivia spoke slowly, clearly, like she was talking to a child, you took out a 25-year loan. For an amount we'll be paying off until retirement. To give a house to your mom, who's marrying a businessman. Did you think for even 1 second about what you were doing? But Victor started. Wait. I'm not finished. You made this decision without me. You didn't consult me. You didn't ask. You didn't even warn me. You just went and signed papers that affect both of us. Because your mom rushed you. But there really were other buyers. Victor, Olivia's voice turned hard, this Robert is a businessman. Your mom said so herself. Why isn't he buying her a house? He's her future husband. Victor opened his mouth and closed it. That simple question had clearly never crossed his mind. Well, I don't know. Mom said she wanted a gift from her son. That it was important to her. That Robert could, of course, but it meant more to her from her own child. Meant more, Olivia repeated. It means more to her that her son gets himself into a crippling 25-year debt than to accept a gift from a wealthy fiancé. Logical. Olivia, you don't understand. Mom sacrificed her whole life for me. Worked 2 jobs, denied herself everything. I owe her. It's my duty. Your duty, Olivia stood up. And my responsibility, then, is to work 2 jobs to pay off that duty. Right? Well, we're a family. A family. She smirked. You know, Victor, I have news for you too. She walked to the closet, took out her bag, pulled a folded sheet of paper from an inner pocket, and placed it on the table in front of him. What's this? Victor took the paper and unfolded it. His face fell. This is a bank statement? My personal account. The one you didn't know about. Victor stared at the numbers and seemed unable to believe his eyes. But where did this come from? This is 3 years, Victor. For 3 years I've been saving money. After that incident with your bonus, remember? When you spent our vacation money on gifts for your mom and Thomas. That's when I realized I would never be dependent on you. And I started saving. Separately. For myself. But why didn't you tell me? And why should I have? So you could tell your mom and she'd convince you that she needs that money more? Victor went pale. It was a low blow but a fair one. And one more thing, Olivia pulled another paper out of her bag. This is from my grandmother. An inheritance. She died a year ago, remember? I went to the funeral. Well, she left me money. A substantial amount. And you kept that quiet too. Yes. Why? Olivia looked at her husband for a long moment. Because I don't trust you, Victor. I haven't for a long time. Every time your mom snaps her fingers, you run to her. Every time her wish matters more than our plans. Every time you choose her over me. That's not true. It is. Remember our trip out of town that fell through because of a leaking faucet? Remember the wedding your mom planned instead of us? Remember how she rearranged my things in my own home? Remember everything, Victor. Honestly. Victor was silent. He sat down on the stool Olivia had just left and stared at the floor. I just wanted her to be happy, he said quietly. She's done so much for me. I understand, Olivia's voice softened a little. I really do. She's your mom, you love her. But Victor, loving your mother doesn't mean destroying your own family. It doesn't mean you get to make decisions for both of us without asking me. It doesn't mean I have to work myself to exhaustion to pay for her wishes. So what now? He looked up. There was fear in his eyes. Are you leaving? Olivia fell silent. It was the question she had been asking herself for the past 3 years. She had imagined this moment many times, the moment when the cup of patience would overflow. And now it had happened. You know, she finally said, I thought that when this happened and I knew that sooner or later something like this would happen, I would just pack my things and leave. I have money. I have an apartment, it's mine, by the way, premarital property. I have a job. I don't need a man to survive. Victor listened without interrupting. His face was gray. But now I'm thinking about something else. I'm thinking about the fact that you don't even understand what you've done. For you, it's a gift for your mom. A noble act. A son's duty. You genuinely believe you did the right thing. Didn't I? Olivia shook her head. No, Victor. You acted like a child. Like a little boy who wants his mom to praise him. At any cost. Even at the cost of his own family. She took her phone and found the number she needed in her contacts. What are you doing? Victor asked warily. Calling a lawyer. Why? Because I need a consultation. I want to understand exactly how this mortgage works. Who is the borrower? Who is the house registered to? And most importantly, what is my level of responsibility for this loan? Victor jumped up. Olivia, wait, let's talk. Maybe there's some way out. A way out of what? She looked up at him. Out of a mortgage you've already signed? Victor, you signed a contract. A legally binding document. You can't just cancel it because your wife is unhappy. But surely we can. Refinance. Or sell it later. Maybe. Probably. But first I want to understand exactly what you dragged me into. And whether you dragged me in at all. She dialed the number. Victor stood nearby, shifting nervously from foot to foot. Hello, Daniel? This is Olivia Carter. Yes, you remember me. I need an urgent consultation. No, not a work matter. A family issue. When can you see me? Tomorrow at 10? Perfect. Thank you. She hung up. Tomorrow at 10 I'll be at the lawyer's office. You can come with me. Or not. Your choice. Of course I'll come, Victor said quickly. Olivia, I'm really sorry. I honestly didn't think you'd react like this. That's exactly the problem, Victor. You didn't think. At all. The night was hard. They lay in the same bed, but there was a chasm between them. Olivia didn't sleep, staring at the ceiling and thinking. About her life. About 3 years of marriage. About how she had gradually turned into a shadow next to Victor and his mom. Her husband tossed and turned beside her. He wasn't sleeping either. Olivia, he called softly in the dark. Do you hate me? She paused before answering. No. Hate is too strong a word. I'm disappointed, exhausted, and very, very angry. But I don't hate you. I can fix everything. I'll talk to Mom, explain. What will you explain to her? That you changed your mind about gifting her a house? The contract is already signed, Victor. The down payment has been made. Then I'll work more. I'll get a second job. You won't pay anything, I'll handle it myself. Olivia turned toward him. And how long will you last? A month? 2? And then you'll say you're tired, that it's too hard, that we're a family and should split everything 50-50. Victor said nothing. They both knew she was right. Tomorrow, Olivia said. First the lawyer. Then we'll figure it out. The morning was gloomy and cold. Olivia got up early, took a shower, had coffee. Victor hovered nearby, trying to help, offering a cup, spreading butter on toast. She didn't push him away, but she didn't let him close either. She kept her distance. At 9, they left the house. The lawyer's office was a 30-minute drive away. The entire way, they were silent, each lost in their own thoughts. Daniel Mitchell was an old acquaintance of Olivia's. He had once helped her with the purchase of her apartment, then advised her on work matters. An experienced, competent lawyer with a solid reputation. He received them in his office, small but cozy, with bookshelves along the walls and a view of a quiet street. So, Daniel folded his hands on the desk. Tell me what happened. Olivia briefly laid out the situation. The lawyer listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes in a notebook. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair. So your spouse took out a mortgage loan in his own name? Yes, Victor confirmed. In my name. Were you present at the signing, Olivia? No. I was at work. I found out afterward. Did you give written consent for this transaction? Olivia frowned. No. Was I supposed to? Daniel smiled for the first time during the conversation. And this is where it gets interesting. Victor, are you married? Yes. 3 years. And you took out the mortgage while married? Well, yes. And did you obtain your spouse's consent? In writing? Victor looked confusedly at his wife, then at the lawyer. No. Was I supposed to? Daniel opened a drawer, pulled out a thick book of statutes, flipped through it. In most states, major financial transactions such as a mortgage require the consent of both spouses if you are married. The exact requirements depend on the state, but generally speaking, yes, your wife's consent should have been obtained. So, Olivia was afraid to believe it. So without your written consent, this transaction can be challenged. Declared invalid. Of course, there are nuances, we need to review the documents, but in general but I already signed it. Victor exclaimed. I paid the down payment. Victor, the lawyer explained patiently, one spouse's signature on a transaction of this magnitude without the consent of the other is a violation of the law. The bank, by the way, should have required that consent. It's strange that they didn't. They asked something about my wife, Victor frowned, trying to remember. But I said she was aware and didn't mind. They believed me. Olivia closed her eyes. He had lied. Her husband had lied to the bank to pull off this scheme. That changes things, Daniel frowned. Providing knowingly false information when applying for a loan is serious. The bank could demand early repayment if they find out. And if we challenge the deal? Olivia asked. We can try. You have a certain window from the moment you learned about the transaction to file a claim to have it declared invalid. The chances are good, given the lack of your consent. And what happens to the house? To the money that's already been paid? If the transaction is declared invalid, the parties are returned to their original positions. The house goes back to the seller, the money goes back to the buyer. That means your husband gets the down payment back. Minus, of course, legal costs and possible penalties from the bank for early termination. Olivia looked at Victor. He sat pale, crushed. So that means Mom will be left without a house? Victor, Daniel sighed, your mother never legally had this house in the first place. It was registered in your name, correct? Well, yes. I took out the mortgage. Exactly. It's your house. Or rather, a house encumbered by a mortgage you're supposed to pay for 25 years. Your mother is just someone you plan to let live there. But legally, she has nothing to do with this property. Victor grabbed his head. But how? I wanted to transfer it to her later. After it was paid off. In 25 years, the lawyer. When you're 62. They left the lawyer's office an hour and a half later. In Olivia's bag was a list of documents needed to challenge the transaction. In Victor's eyes was emptiness. Olivia, he stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. I don't know what to do. Mom will. She was so happy about this house. She already told everyone. Her friends, neighbors, that Robert of hers. Her problem, Olivia replied harshly. Not mine. But she's my mother. And I'm your wife. Or I was. Victor flinched. What do you mean, was? Olivia was silent for a moment, looking at the gray October sky. I haven't made a final decision yet, she said at last. But, Victor, you need to understand after yesterday, our marriage is under serious question. Not because of the money. Money can be dealt with. But because of how you acted. How you treat me. I love you. Love isn't words. It's actions. And your actions say that your mom will always come first. I'll be second. And it will always be that way. I can change. You can, Olivia agreed. The question is whether you actually want to. Truly want to. Or if you're just saying what I want to hear to save the marriage. Victor didn't answer. And that silence spoke louder than any words. That same evening, Olivia was sitting alone in her apartment. Victor had gone to his mom's place. I need to explain things to her, he said. Olivia didn't object. Let him explain. Let him deal with what he had done. She poured herself a glass of wine, sat by the window, and took a business card out of her wallet. James Anderson. Partner. Consulting services. For 3 months, that card had been sitting in her wallet. For 3 months, she had been telling herself she would never call. That she was a married woman. That it would be wrong. But what was right in her life? A marriage where her opinion meant nothing? A relationship where she was always second? Olivia picked up her phone and dialed the number. Hello, James? This is Olivia Carter. We met at the conference in Boston. You mentioned career opportunities. Olivia. There was genuine surprise in his voice and, it seemed, happiness. Of course I remember you. I'm so glad you called. They talked for an hour. About work. About opportunities. About the fact that James's consulting firm was opening a branch in her city and was looking for a department head. About how her experience and qualifications were a perfect fit. Not a word about anything personal. A purely professional conversation. But when Olivia hung up, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Victor came back late, around midnight. Olivia was already lying in bed but wasn't asleep. He entered the bedroom quietly and sat on the edge of the bed. Mom's hysterical, he said dully. She screamed, cried. Said I betrayed her. Said you turned me against her. Said you're destroying our family. And what did you say? Victor paused. I said it was my decision. That I didn't ask you, and that it was wrong. That we're going to challenge the deal. Olivia propped herself up on her elbow. You told your mom it was wrong? Yes. And how did she react? She threw me out, his voice shook. Said I'm an ungrateful son. That she gave her whole life to me, and I. He didn't finish. Olivia looked at her husband. For the first time in 3 years, he had done something his mother didn't like. For the first time, he had taken his wife's side. Was this the beginning of something? Or just a momentary weakness that would pass? Go to bed, she said finally. We'll talk in the morning. Morning brought new developments. At 8, Margaret called. Olivia watched Victor look at the phone screen, at his mother's name and not answer. You're not picking up, she asked. No, he put the phone down. Not right now. It was a small step. But an important one. At 9, the lawyer called. He had reviewed the documents Victor brought the day before, and the news was mixed. We can challenge the deal, he said. But there's a complication. The bank appears to have deliberately turned a blind eye to the lack of spousal consent. There may be a corruption element. Someone likely got a kickback for fast-tracking the deal without extra paperwork. Is that bad? Olivia asked. Yes and no. On the one hand, it complicates the process. The bank will fight back. On the other, if we prove wrongdoing on their side, we may not only get the money back but also receive compensation. How long will this take? Several months at least. Maybe half a year. Olivia sighed. 6 months of legal battles. 6 months of uncertainty. 6 months in limbo. Start, she said. The sooner we begin, the sooner it ends. The next 2 weeks were hell. Margaret bombarded Victor with calls, messages, voice notes. She cried, threatened, manipulated. You're killing me, my heart is acting up, how can you do this to me? Victor held on. Not always, not perfectly. Sometimes he snapped, sometimes yelled at Olivia that it was all her fault. But then he apologized. And he didn't run to his mom. Olivia filed the paperwork to challenge the deal. The bank, just as the lawyer predicted, took a defensive stance. But the documents were on Olivia's side. There was no spousal consent, and that was a fact that couldn't be disputed. At the same time, she met with James. Officially for work. He showed her the future branch office, talked about the company's plans, discussed the terms. The offer was excellent: more money, more responsibility, more prospects. I need time to think, Olivia said. Of course, James smiled. Just not too long. The position won't wait. She thought. About work. About marriage. About the future. About what she wanted from life. And sometime during the 3rd week after that fateful Thursday, Olivia made a decision. She came home earlier than usual. Victor was in the kitchen, cooking dinner. After everything that had happened, he was trying to do more around the house. Maybe he was trying to make up for it. Maybe he really was changing. Victor, we need to talk, Olivia said. He flinched. Those words rarely mean anything good. I've made a decision, she continued. What decision? Olivia sat down at the table and looked at her husband long, carefully. I'm not leaving. Not yet. Victor exhaled in relief. But I have conditions. What kind? First, we challenge this deal all the way. No compromises, no settlements, even if the bank offers one. I want every dollar back. Okay. Second, you start seeing a psychotherapist. About your relationship with your mother. About why you can't say no to her. About why her wishes matter to you more than anything else. Victor darkened. You want me to see a psychologist? A therapist? Yes. I do. This is non-negotiable. Therapy or divorce. He was silent for a long time. Then he nodded. All right. What else? Third, I accept the job offer. New position, new company. That means I'll be busier, traveling more for work. And I will not be asking for your permission. I never forbade you to work. You didn't forbid it. But you didn't really support it either. Now I need your support. Real support. Okay, Victor nodded again. Is that all? No. Fourth and most important. Your mother has no right to interfere in our life. Ever. Under any circumstances. If she wants to communicate with you, fine. But not at the expense of our family. Not at the expense of our plans. Not at the expense of my nerves. That will be hard, Victor said quietly. I know. But if you can't do this, tell me now. I don't want to waste another 3 years on something that's doomed. Victor sat motionless, staring at one point. Olivia could see him fighting himself, the clash between his love for his mother and his fear of losing his wife. She could see the worldview he had lived in for 37 years cracking at the seams. Finally, he looked up. I'll try, he said. I can't promise I'll succeed. But I'll try. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. Olivia nodded. All right. Try. But remember, there won't be a second chance. The next day, she called James and accepted the job offer. A week later, the court accepted the lawsuit challenging the mortgage deal. Victor signed up for psychotherapy. He went twice a week, came back thoughtful, sometimes upset. He didn't share details, but Olivia could see something in him was changing. Margaret didn't give up. She called, wrote, showed up unannounced. Once she made a scene under their windows, screaming at the top of her lungs that her son had abandoned her, that her daughter-in-law was a witch, that she cursed them both. The neighbors called the police. Margaret was taken away. Victor didn't go out to her. He stood by the window, pale, hands shaking, but he didn't go out. It was a breakthrough. Small, but important. A month passed. The court scheduled the first hearing. The lawyer was optimistic the evidence was strong. The bank was clearly nervous. Olivia started her new job. It was challenging, but interesting. James turned out to be a great manager, demanding but fair. There was nothing between them and never could be. Olivia was married, even if problematically. But his presence in her life was a reminder the world didn't end with Victor. Victor continued therapy. One evening, after another session, he said, "My therapist says I'm codependent with my mom. That she's been manipulating me since childhood. That I was never a separate person for her, just an extension of herself." "And how do you feel about that?" Olivia asked. "I don't know," he paused. "It hurts. It's scary. Like I lived my whole life asleep, and now I've woken up and don't recognize reality." Olivia took his hand. "For the first time in a long while. That's normal. Awakening is always painful." 2 more months passed. The court ruled in Olivia's favor. The deal was declared invalid. The bank was ordered to return the down payment plus compensation for moral damages, not huge, but pleasant. The cottage Victor had wanted to gift his mom was returned to the seller. Margaret was left without the present. She called. For the first time in 2 months after that scene under their windows. Victor had blocked her number. She called from someone else's phone, sobbing into the receiver. "Victor, my son, how could you? I dreamed of that house. You promised." Victor listened. Olivia sat beside him, holding his hand. "Mom," he said finally, "I didn't promise. I made a decision without thinking. It was a mistake. My mistake. But fixing it is also my decision. And I've made it. It's all her. She turned you against me." "No, Mom. It's me." Olivia just opened my eyes. "To a lot of things. You're choosing her over me?" Victor was silent for a moment. Olivia felt his hand tremble. "I'm choosing my family," he said at last. "Olivia is my family. My wife. The mother of my future children. And yes, Mom, if you're putting it that way, I am choosing her." He hung up and looked at Olivia. His eyes were filled with tears. "I did it," he whispered. "I said it to her." Olivia hugged him. Tightly, like never before. "Yes," she whispered back. "You did. This wasn't a fairy tale. Not a story where the evil mother-in-law gets what she deserves and the prince and princess live happily ever after." Margaret didn't disappear. She kept calling, kept manipulating, kept trying to regain control over her son. Her third marriage to Robert did happen without a cottage as a gift, but it happened. Though, judging by the hints she dropped in rare conversations, that marriage was also cracking at the seams. Victor continued therapy. He learned to set boundaries, to say no, to separate his own desires from his mother's demands. It was hard. Sometimes he slipped, sometimes he backtracked. But overall, he was moving forward. Olivia worked at the new company. She got another promotion. Her personal account kept growing, a safety net that, fortunately, never had to be used. She and Victor started couples therapy. Together. They learned to talk, to hear each other, to build a partnership. It was work daily, meticulous, sometimes exhausting. But work that mattered. A year after that fateful October Thursday, Olivia stood by the same kitchen window. Outside, leaves of yet another fall were swirling. Victor came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her shoulders. "What are you thinking about? How much has changed in a year? For the better?" Olivia paused, turned to her husband and looked into his eyes. "Yes," she said. "For the better." And for the first time in a long while, she truly believed it. But the story doesn't end there. Because real stories don't end, they continue as long as life continues. And this story still had something ahead. Something neither Olivia nor Victor expected. Something that would turn their lives upside down again, but this time in a very different way. A year and a half passed. March turned out unusually warm, the snow melted early, and the city was already breathing spring. Olivia was coming home from work in high spirits today. The board of directors had approved her for the position of regional director. It was a major promotion she hadn't even dreamed of a year earlier. She opened the apartment door and immediately felt something was wrong. In the entryway stood unfamiliar shoes, women's low-heeled pumps. Voices came from the kitchen. Olivia froze. One voice belonged to Victor. The other. She quietly walked down the hallway and stopped at the kitchen door. At the table sat Margaret, older, gaunt, with dark circles under her eyes. In front of her was a cup of tea she hadn't touched. Victor sat opposite her, his back to the door. He hadn't heard his wife come in. And then he said the apartment was his now, Margaret was saying in a trembling voice. That I have to move out. That all I have is what I'm wearing. Victor, he robbed me. That Robert. He turned out to be a con artist. Olivia leaned against the doorframe. So that's how it was. Her mother-in-law's third marriage had ended predictably, only much worse than one could have expected. Victor was silent. Olivia saw his tense back, his clenched fists. I have nowhere to live, Margaret continued. My friends all have their own problems. I called Karen, Linda, no one can take me in. Victor, my son, you won't leave your mother on the street, will you? Silence hung in the air. Olivia waited. This was the moment of truth, the test of everything Victor had learned over a year and a half of therapy. Mom, Victor's voice was steady, though Olivia could hear how much it cost him. I can't make this decision on my own. I need to talk to Olivia. What does she have to do with it? Margaret flared up. This is a family matter. I'm your mother. And Olivia is my family. We make these decisions together. Victor, I'll end up on the street. Today. I have nowhere to go. Then wait. Olivia will be here soon, and we'll discuss it. At that moment, Olivia stepped into the kitchen. I'm already here. Margaret flinched. Fear flickered in her eyes, followed by something like hope. A strange combination. Olivia, she tried to smile, I was just telling Victor. I'm in trouble. Big trouble. I heard. Olivia sat down at the table next to her husband. Robert turned out to be a con artist? Yes. Can you imagine? He transferred my apartment to himself. I don't know how. I didn't sign anything. I mean, I did sign, but I thought it was some kind of insurance. He said it was necessary for business. And now it turns out it was a deed of gift. And he's kicking me out. Olivia exchanged a glance with Victor. He gave a barely perceptible shrug. He was in shock too. Have you gone to the police? Olivia asked. Yes, but they said it's a civil matter. That I signed it myself, voluntarily. That fraud still has to be proven. And a lawyer? Margaret lowered her eyes. I don't have money for a lawyer. Robert. He took everything. Cards, savings. I'm left with nothing. Olivia leaned back in her chair. What a twist. The woman who a year and a half ago demanded a cottage as a gift was now sitting in front of her, destitute, homeless, crushed. Part of Olivia, the part that remembered all the humiliations, all the manipulations, all the attempts to destroy her marriage, wanted to say, this is not our problem. You chose this man yourself. Deal with it. But another part, the one that saw an elderly, frightened woman in front of her, couldn't say those words. Margaret, Olivia said slowly, Victor and I need to talk. Alone. Could you wait in the living room? Her mother-in-law nodded and shuffled out. Even her walk had changed. Where was that stately stride with which she once inspected their apartment? What do you think? Victor asked when they were alone. Olivia paused, gathering her thoughts. I think your mom is an adult who made a stupid decision and is now paying for it. Just like you did a year and a half ago with the mortgage. It's different. She was deceived. She was deceived because she let herself be deceived. because she wanted to believe in a fairy tale, in a rich husband who would solve all her problems. Victor rubbed his face with his palms. I can't put her out on the street, Olivia. I can't. She's my mother. I'm not asking you to put her out on the street. He lifted his head, looking at his wife with hope. Then what? Let's deal with the facts. What exactly happened? How did Robert manage to transfer the apartment? Is there a chance to challenge this deal? We've been through something similar, remember? Victor gave a grim smile. I remember. Only then we were challenging my stupidity. And now? And now hers. But the principle is the same. First, a lawyer. Then a decision. You'll help? Olivia looked at her husband for a long time. He had changed over the past year and a half. He had learned to ask instead of demand, to wait instead of pressure, to see her as a partner, not support staff. I'll help, she finally said. But under certain conditions. What conditions? Your mom can stay with us. Temporarily. While we sort this situation out. But temporarily, Victor. Not forever. And she has to follow the rules. What rules? No interfering in our life. No comments on how I run the household. No advice unless she's asked. No manipulating you. If she breaks even one of these rules, she leaves. Immediately. No second chances. Victor nodded. I'll talk to her. No, Olivia shook her head. We'll talk to her. Together. She needs to hear this from both of us. The conversation with Margaret was hard. At first, she tried to bargain. Then she tried to play on pity. Then she resorted to manipulation. Victor, you're not really going to let this woman dictate terms to your own mother? But Victor held his ground. Calmly, firmly, he repeated, Mom, these are mine and Olivia's conditions. Shared conditions. If they don't work for you, we'll help you find another option. Social services. Temporary shelters. At the word shelter, Margaret gave in. She agreed to everything, would have signed anything, just to avoid ending up in some state facility. They moved her into the small room that used to be Olivia's home office. The desk had to be moved into the bedroom, but it was a small sacrifice. The first few days were a nightmare. Margaret alternated between crying, shutting down, and blaming everyone around her for her misfortune. Victor was torn between work, therapy, and trying to support his mother. Olivia did her best to keep her distance, but it wasn't easy. The apartment was small, there was nowhere to escape. On the fourth day, Olivia came home from work and walked into a strange scene. Margaret was standing in the middle of the kitchen, holding Olivia's favorite vase. I just wanted to move it, her mother-in-law said quickly. It doesn't really belong here, I thought. Put it back, Olivia said, her voice icy. Please. Margaret put it back. Her hands were shaking. Olivia, I didn't mean to. Margaret, we had an agreement. You don't touch my things, you don't rearrange furniture, you don't change anything in this house. You are a guest here. A temporary guest. Tears glistened in her mother-in-law's eyes. But she nodded. I understand. I'm sorry. It was strange hearing an apology from a woman who had never apologized to anyone before. A week later, Olivia took Margaret to Daniel, the same lawyer who had helped them with the mortgage. The story her mother-in-law told was a classic fraud scheme. Robert, if that was even his real name, turned out to be a professional marriage scammer. He specialized in older, single women who owned property. He courted them beautifully, proposed marriage, and then, already married, tricked them into signing documents transferring ownership of their apartments. Unfortunately, cases like this are fairly common, Daniel said. The good news is that if we can prove you signed the documents under deception, the deal can be challenged. The bad news is that it's a long process, and the outcome isn't guaranteed. How long? Olivia asked. A year, maybe more. And the costs will be significant. Margaret went pale. I don't have that kind of money. We do, Victor said unexpectedly. Olivia looked at him. He met her gaze. She's my mother, he said quietly. I know she's done a lot of bad things. I know she tried to destroy our marriage, but I can't watch her lose everything and do nothing." Olivia was silent. This was the moment she had been afraid of. The moment when she would have to choose principles or humanity. "All right," she said at last. "We'll cover the legal fees. But this will be a loan, Margaret. When you get your apartment back, if you get it back, you'll reimburse us." Her mother-in-law nodded so fast Olivia worried about her neck. "Of course. Of course. I'll pay back every dollar." The court case dragged on for 8 months. A lot happened during that time. The police eventually opened a case against Robert. It turned out Margaret wasn't his only victim. 4 other women came forward with similar stories. Their combined testimony significantly strengthened the case. Robert was arrested while trying to cross the border. He was found with forged documents under 3 different names and accounts in offshore banks. A professional. The court declared the apartment transfer invalid. Margaret got her home back. On the day the ruling came down, she was sitting in the kitchen, the same one where she had asked for help 8 months earlier. Only now, instead of cold tea, she held a paper with an official seal. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, looking from Victor to Olivia. You didn't have to help. After everything I did. After how I behaved." Olivia was silent. Victor was too. "I was a terrible mother-in-law," Margaret continued. "I understand that now. Truly understand it. Before, I thought I was just taking care of my son, that I knew better how he should live. But in reality I was suffocating him. And you too." She paused, gathering her courage. "Olivia, forgive me. For everything. For how I treated you. For trying to turn you against each other. For that whole cottage story. I knew it was insane, but I wanted it so badly. Wanted to feel that my son loved me. That he was willing to do anything for me. That's not how love works," Olivia said quietly. "Now I know that." Silence settled. Margaret folded the paper and put it into her bag. "I'll move out tomorrow," she said. "The apartment is mine again. I can go back. Thank you for taking me in." She stood up and headed for the kitchen door. She stopped at the threshold. "Victor, my son, I love you. I truly do. I just didn't know how to show it the right way. But I'll try to learn. If you give me a chance." Victor stood up, walked over, and hugged his mother. "I will, Mom. But let's do it differently, okay? Like adults. No manipulation, no hysterics. Just a mother and a son." Margaret sniffled. "All right. I'll try." Another year passed. Margaret kept her word. She paid back the legal fees. In installments, from her pension, but she paid back every dollar. Their relationship changed. It didn't become perfect. Too much had been done and said over the years. But it became tolerable. Margaret visited once a month, called once a week. No more. No unsolicited advice, no criticism of Olivia, no attempts to manipulate her son. Olivia didn't know whether this was a genuine change or simply fear of being alone again. But the result worked for her. One April evening, 3.5 years after that fateful Thursday, Olivia was once again standing by the kitchen window. Outside, the cherry tree was in bloom. They had planted it in the courtyard the previous spring, and now it had blossomed. Lost in thought? Victor came up behind her and hugged her. Remembering, she smiled. "That day when you came home with your amazing news." Victor groaned. "Don't remind me. I'm still embarrassed." "But I'm not. You know why?" "Why?" Olivia turned to her husband. "Because that day changed everything. If you hadn't pulled that stunt with the mortgage, we would have kept living the same way. I would have endured it. You wouldn't have noticed the problem. Your mom would have kept running our lives. But instead, we both grew up. We became a real family. Through crisis. Sometimes that's the only way to grow." Victor was quiet for a moment, then reached into his pocket. "Since we're reminiscing, I have something for you." He pulled out a small velvet box. Olivia recognized it just like the one from 3.5 years ago when he proposed. Victor, we're already married, she laughed. I know. This isn't that. He opened the box. Inside was a ring thin, elegant, with 3 small stones. 3 stones, 3 years we truly lived together. I mean the real 3 years. After that Thursday. He hesitated. I wanted to say thank you. For not leaving back then. For giving me a chance to change. For staying. Olivia looked at the ring, at her husband, at the blooming cherry tree outside the window. And she felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Happiness. Simple, calm, real happiness. Thank you, she said, taking the ring. It's beautiful. You're beautiful. They stood by the window, holding each other, watching spring. Watching a new life begin outside the glass. And inside them too. By the way, Victor said a minute later, I've got one more piece of news. Just don't freak out. Olivia tensed up. What? Mom called. She said she met a man. At a dance for people over 60. Oh God. Wait, that's not all. She said that before deciding anything, she wants to introduce him to us. Get our opinion. And those were literally her words, to make sure he's not a scammer. Olivia stared at her husband. She wants our advice? Your mom? Can you believe it? They looked at each other and burst out laughing. Loud, from the heart, the way they hadn't laughed in a very long time. Somewhere deep in the apartment, a phone started ringing. Probably Margaret trying to set up a meeting. I'll answer, Victor said, pulling away. Wait. Olivia caught his hand, pulled him back, and kissed him. Go ahead. Just tell her we're busy on Sunday. We're going to pick out a crib. Victor froze. Olivia. Are you saying I'm saying that in 7 months there will be 3 of us? So yes, let's meet Mom's gentleman friend. But on Saturday, not Sunday. Victor stood there with his mouth open, unable to say a word. Then he scooped his wife up in his arms and spun her around the kitchen. We're going to be parents. Olivia, we're going to be parents. Victor, careful. Put me down. He did, his eyes shining. This is the best news of my life. The best. Better than a mortgage on a cottage for your mom? Olivia couldn't resist. Victor made a face. You're going to remind me of that for the rest of my life, aren't you? For the rest of your life, she confirmed. That's my superpower. They laughed again. The phone kept ringing. The cherry tree outside the window kept blooming, and somewhere in the future a new chapter was waiting for them with its own challenges, joys, and unexpected twists. But this time, they were ready. Because they had learned the most important thing, how to be a team. Not perfect, not flawless, but real. And that might be the most important thing a family can have. Epilogue. 3 years later. A summer evening. A country house just outside the city, small, cozy, bought with their shared savings. The table is set on the veranda. Margaret is bustling around with pies, her new husband Peter is tending the grill. A pleasant man, calm, reliable, a former engineer, a widower, no criminal past whatsoever. Thoroughly vetted. 3-year-old Emily is racing across the lawn, a copy of her mother, except for her father's gray-blue eyes. Victor is barely keeping up. Daddy, catch me. I'm catching you, I'm catching you. Olivia is sitting in a lounge chair, one hand resting on her rounded belly. Their second child, a boy. They'll name him Paul, after her father. Margaret comes over and hands her a glass of juice. Olivia, drink up. You need your vitamins. Thank you. Her mother-in-law sits down on the edge of the chair next to her. You know, she says quietly, so the others won't hear, I often think about that day. When Victor came home with that idiotic mortgage. I do too, Olivia smiles. I was sure you'd leave him back then. I even kind of wanted you to. Terrible, right? A little, Olivia agrees. And now I look at you and think what a blessing it is that you stayed. What a blessing that you gave him a chance. And me too. Olivia looks at her mother-in-law. At this woman who was once her greatest enemy. And now? Now she's part of the family. A strange, complicated family, but a family nonetheless. You know, Margaret, Olivia says, I don't regret anything. Not a single thing. And it's the absolute truth. Emily runs up and climbs onto her grandma's lap. Grandma Margaret, are the pies ready? Almost, sweetheart. 5 more minutes. Can I have the first piece? Of course you can. You get the first one. Victor collapses into the lounge chair next to them, breathing hard. That's it, I give up. She wore me out. Daddy, you're old. Emily laughs. Who's old? Come here. He grabs his daughter and starts tickling her. She squeals with delight. Olivia watches them, her husband, her daughter, her mother-in-law, the sunset over the rooftops of the country houses. And she thinks this is it. This is what it was all for. Not a fairy tale. Not a perfect picture. Just life. Real, complicated, beautiful life. And she wouldn't trade it for anything else.